This train is the 14R and is moving north through Sunbury on an unrecorded date in the summer of 2020. We're standing near CP Horn, and the head end of this train is already on the Sunbury/River line past CP Case and Shikellamy Avenue. Northumberland was founded in 1772 and was purchased from the Iroquois Indians in the First Treaty of Fort Stanwix in 1768. The village was laid out in 1772 and was evacuated during the big runaway of the American Revolution in 1778. It was finally resettled in 1784. Front Street Station is a 1910 Pennsylvania Railroad station that's been transformed into an upscale restaurant. So prominent is Front Street to the area that the Central Pennsylvania chapter of the National Railway Historical Society newsletter is named after the station's now permanent Pennsylvania passenger car, the Susquehannock. In 1860, a smaller wooden passenger station was built on the site by the Pennsylvania Railroad but was destroyed by fire after the turn of the century. In 1908, construction began on the building you see here, in addition to an expanded classification yard, which became the fifth largest railroad yard in the United States. When the building was completed, it opened the way for the Pennsylvania Railroad's flourishing passenger train service that brought 18 trains to town each day. The station closed in 1958 and remained closed until J. Seidel purchased the building in 1981 and restored it for his restaurant. Front Street Station Restaurant opened for business on August 1st, 1983. Behind the station is CP Norrie, which is the gateway to Northumberland Yard and Central Pennsylvania. In years past, Norrie was a busy yard, but like so much infrastructure today on Norfolk Southern, Norrie sees minimal train traffic. The bright spot at Northumberland is the resident short line, the North Shore Railroad, and one of its subsidiaries, the Shamokin Valley Railroad, that are both headquartered in town. Looking to the north, the track on the right is the easternmost of three mainline tracks through the yard. And notice that turnout up yonder. That runs behind a business called Fermano's. I don't know this for certain, but I think that they either ship or receive canned goods in those boxcars. Scenes like these are disappearing in railroading as Class 1s are abandoning carload freight in favor of end-to-end unit trains. About 60 miles northwest from Norrie is the Norfolk Southern Lock Haven Yard in the town of Lock Haven. Like Norrie, Lock Haven is mostly quiet, but also like Northumberland, a North Shore Railroad subsidiary calls Lock Haven its home. This time it's the Nittany and Bald Eagle Railroad. Moving over to what was once the Sunbury line but is now the River line, it's a bitter cold January morning in the small riverside town called Riverside. Across the river from Riverside is the Delaware, Lackawanna, and Western Railroad town of Danville. Danville is one of the many towns and boroughs that the Bloom Line runs through between Norrie and Berwick. Rail fanning in central Pennsylvania is a scenic undertaking since there are usually no major highways. Chasing trains is a series of ups and downs and twists and turns, endlessly changing scenery from farms and villages to towns and churches. This is Flyover America. Today, we're chasing the daily southbound Binghamton, New York to Enola, Pennsylvania train 11Z. Shown here at a place the railroad calls Banks. If you look ever so closely, you'll notice the siding track in the foreground next to the train. It's a hand-throw siding, not used much from what I can tell, and it's known to rail fans as the Mud Hole. And if you're wondering if you've seen the newly minted NSAC 44 before, you have. It was trailing second on the Train 14R that was headed by the Virginian Heritage Unit number 1069, and that was our last railroad catch of 2019 and the decade. The AC-44 C6M is the former -9 44CW number 9096 and is leading a massive 6-unit last shift just a few miles from the Buffalo line in Sunbury at the control point called CP Case. The Pennsylvania Railroad began using CTC on the Buffalo line way back in the late 1930s with an installation between Machias, New York and East Aurora, New York, but the second phase between Rockville, Pennsylvania and the west end of the Northumberland Yard was accomplished in the late 1950s. Part of the upgrades included this then new block station at Case, which replaced the original tower. The board was a three-sided Union switch and signal design common to the time, and the rightmost portion was originally intended to serve the Wilkes-Barre branch, but the PRR reportedly balked at the cost and opted to close the tower at Nescopec, which controlled a nearly 3-mile-long siding near the geographic center of the 60-mile branch. As originally designed, the mainline portion of the project involved controlled sidings at Ferry, which is Clark's Ferry, Miller, which is Millersburg, and Boyle, which is Herndon, Pennsylvania. Double track began at Creek, just south of Sunbury, and continued to Molly at the west end of the Northumberland Yard. The junction to the Wilkes-Barre line in both directions was accomplished by means of a unique arrangement whereby freights crossing the bridge from Northumberland crossed the eastbound connection at grade, then looped around the northwest corner of Sunbury. The two lines joined at Banks, another remote-controlled interlocking 1 mile to the north, but in earlier days, double track extended to Raven Tower about 5 miles to the north. We talked about this funky arrangement in video T108. Link is in the description just in case you missed it. The Shamokin branch could also be accessed directly from the south by means of a connection referred to in earlier electronic timetables as the Haas lead. The old Shamokin branch is now the Shamokin Valley Short Line, which operates the line between Sunbury and Mount Carmel. If you're lucky, you might be able to catch the Shamokin Valley leaving Norrie and moving on to the Cedar-Cog. We were in the right place at the right time, but the contradicting Sunbury streets proved to be too much of an obstacle to catching up to today's local, so we called off the chase. Sunbury, Pennsylvania was cut up into pieces by two railroads. The three major cuts were done by the east-west Reading track that came across the Susquehanna from Williamsport and disappeared up the Shamokin Creek Valley and into the anthracite coal fields. The Pennsylvania Railroad's Mount Carmel branch that snaked through town was locally called the Horn Railroad because of its large reverse curves. There was a siding off of this line that started right at Shamokin Creek and went straight west when the Horn made its first turn and joined the north-south main heading south. This track was so close to the Reading, in fact, it doesn't even qualify as creating its own slice of Sunbury. The north-south Pensy track that came over from Northumberland that ran all the way down to the Rockville Bridge and Harrisburg is the Buffalo line. We're at milepost 259 on that line watching the oncoming train 11Z thunder through town on January 9, 2020. It's just after 10 a.m. and at this time, the Z as it's known was an early morning runner that was no doubt a bane to morning job commuters. Our train 11Z disappeared to the south, and in a few hours it was sitting in the Enola Yard. Enola Yard is always an adventure because you just never know what you're going to see. On this day, we see a line of stored SD70 series locomotives, including two Phase 2 SD70Ms. Norfolk Southern has been placing hundreds of DC tractive diesels in storage, probably a part of its Top 21 Precision Schedule Railroading initiative. What caught my eye among the various black diesels was the GP38-3 number 5827. These were rebuilt from ex-Southern high hood GP50s. These new Dash 3s have a low, short hood and have been derated to 2,000 horsepower. Note the two cooling fans separated on the roof. Coupled to the 5827 is the GP59 number 4619 and a former Southern Railway SD40-2 number 3204. The 59 diesel is a truly rare bird, a 12-cylinder, 3,000 horsepower variant of the GP60s. These diesels were only purchased by NS, with some having been rebuilt into GP59Es like the 4661, which we can see here conducting its switching duties along with the slug unit and the GP38-2. Other goodies in the yard was a couple of high hood Jeep 38-2s along with an Admiral cab version and the Norfolk and Western Heritage unit, who despite being flanked by the 5007, its blue with gold lettering can't be mistaken, even amidst a smattering of black and white diesels. And as long as we're talking about Heritage units, it should also be pointed out that the Wabash Heritage unit was also at Enola today, but it was filthy dirty and photographing it would have meant parking the car again, which I wasn't in the mood to do. One last FYI before we leave Enola, the 5007, you know, the one that photobombed our shot of the 8103, note that spiffy new Admiral cab. This is what she looked like in 2016 before her modern day facelift. In addition to Enola Yard, I also ventured over to Cove on the Pittsburgh line this day to see some trains. Now, I only caught one, an empty coal train speeding westbound back to the coal fields around Shire Oaks. But as a little bonus to this video, I'm including that coal train behind 3 different modern day examples of AC and DC GE power.